Now we'll be iterating through arguments, arrays, string, map, set, because all of them implement what we call the double at iterator symbol. This is it, iterator. The objects, they implement this at double at iterator. So whenever we use the for of against any data type, what it does is to call the method, this double at iterator, in the object or in the data that it was called against. So arrays, for example, this fruit have the at iterator implemented. Now let's verify this. So we do something like this: symbol fruits, then we get the symbol dot iterator. Then let's log it. You see, it gives us this. So it means that symbol dot at iterator is available or present in the fruits object. So this is the reason why we were able to use the for of against it. So whenever we use for of or iterate over an object using the for of, what it means that the object or the data must have this symbol dot iterator available in it. So this is the reason why we are not able to iterate over objects. For example, let's have object like this, name. So if we use for of against it, we run into error. Let's just try an empty. You see, user is not an iterable. This is an object, it is not an iterable. We are able to iterate over arrays string because they are iterable. So now let's also verify for string. Now this is a string and can access the symbol dot iterator. You see it. So this is the reason why we are able to iterate against string using the for of loop. So whenever we iterate against a data type, what it does is to call this a symbol dot iterator. We can see here that it is a function. So it calls it and it returns a function. Now let's look into this symbol dot iterator. The symbol dot iterator moves just like the generator function. Let's look at this post where we'll see about iterables. So you see, an iterable, it must return an object with properties done and with value object which has done and value. Then the done is boolean that denotes when the end of the string is reached, and the value holds the value of the current cycle. So it's something like this, like a generator function, that returns an object, and the object is next. Then this next returns an object with the current value we want to return, and done. This done is a boolean that denotes okay that it is done. We have returned every value in the object. So arrays string have all this, but object does not have it. That's why we are not able to iterate over object, but we are able to iterate over all other data types and objects. So we see in an iterator, it returns next and returns this. So this is the value, and this is a boolean that denotes whether it's done with the values it's returning, or we should call it again. So what the for of does is to call the iterator, symbol dot iterator, in the object it was passed. Then it calls it. It knows it returns an object that contains next function there. Now it calls this next function. The next function returns this. Now, for loop picks the property value and returns whatever that is here. Then checks the done property. If the done property is false, it goes again and calls the iterator again. It calls the iterator again, calls the next method again. The next method returns this object. Now it checks the value, it sends out the value, then checks the done property. If the done property is true, now it exits and stops the iteration. So this iterator, like we said, is what the for of used to iterate over an object and return the values. Now let's see it. So for an object to be an iterator, it must have this symbol dot iterator in each object. Now let's look at also the fruits array. This tests that the fruits array is iterable. You see it is iterable. Then the second one calls the next, because remember we said an iterator returns this next. So that's why we called the iterator function. Then I'm now called next. You see it, and the next returns an object value and done. So you see the value here, it returns is apple, the first element. So you see it, then it returns done. Done means false. It is not yet done. There are still other elements in the array. So if we call next again, it will return apple, done, false, value, banana, false. Let's clear this console. You see it. This one returns apple. The next one returns, okay, apple. Sorry, we made a mistake. What we have to do is to assign this to a variable and then call that variable so that it maintains the same state. Let's say it fruits iterator. Yes, something like this. So that we don't have to restart it. So we will now call the next here. So you see it. The first one, apple. This one gives us apple. Let's remove this for now. It gives us apple. Then the second call gives us banana, the second element in banana, and also is done. False. So because there is still another element, is not yet done. So now let's run to log the last. So you see value is done. So done is false. When we have to run it, so you see after each iteration, before it runs, it have to check the value. So it checks it and see that done in this case is true. So it exits and returns only this thread. So that's what happens whenever we do this. So in the first iteration goes like this in this line, and it returns this. Now fruit here will now have the value. It checks done, the done is false, it goes again, calls this number 2, it gives banana, then returns the value, which is banana here inside this. It logs here, then it checks done, it exits, then but before it gives back control to the main, it checks done, done is false, it goes again, calls this, which returns this, and then it gives value, the orange, down to this, then and goes again, then it calls this, which returns this. It sees that here done is true. So since done is true, it doesn't call the code inside this inner body here. It skips it, then and gives control to the main thread. So this is the practical steps and the inner workings of the for of. So because the fruits array has the symbol dot iterator, so we're able to use the for of in it. So now let's say that we have string here, name John Doe. It's still the same thing. It has a string, has the iterator. So you see it, and we can call the next method there to return to us all the values or all the characters inside the string. So now let's call it. You see, it returns to us J and done false. So it will calling this next over and over again will return each and every one of the characters inside this name string until it's done. So we have how many characters here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have to call this close to 8 times for us to get all the characters there. So let's call it close to 8 times. Let's copy this. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this ninth one will be undefined and done false. Let's clear here and call it. You see, the first one J, second one, second call 0, O, third call, which is this, H, fourth call, N, fifth call, the space we have here, the space here, then and so on, D, O, the eighth one, E. Then the last one, there is nothing there. We have exhausted the string. That's where we now have value undefined and done true. It exists. So this is how the iterator works on string, and this is how the for of is able to loop through a string and give us all the values in it till the end. So, but in object we have no iterator there at all. In an object, we have no iterator. Let's just a simple object here. You see, we have no iterator there. So it logs undefined. That's why we are not able to use the for of against an object. Now, if we remove the symbol.iterator, if we set it to null or remove it from an object, we'll not be able to use the for of on it. Like name here is iterable, but if we do something like this, string prototype is null. Let's do it after it. Then after this sets the iterator to null. So iterator does not exist at all on a string. So we cannot be able to iterate over this name using the for of. So if you run it, you see that it will say name is not iterable. So we hooked into the iterable symbol.iterable, set it to null, and we're able to remove the iterator. So we cannot use for of, we cannot iterate over a string after this was done using the for of method. So same thing with an array. If we change this to an array, we'll not be able to use an array at all. Let's use our fruits. We cannot be able to use our fruits. like this. Now let's clear the console. We'll not be able to use our, so it says fruit is not iterable. Now let's create a simple iterator from the our very first iterator function that we this one. So what we're going to do, we just make it simple. It will return an array of numbers. This one, 2, 3. So this iterator will just return first this number 1, and the second iteration 2, and the third 3. So we'll make it very simple. So on the first iteration, this value here will be 1, done will be false. On the second iteration, value will be 2, done will be false also. Second iteration, third iteration, value will be 3. Then on the fourth iteration, value will be undefined, while done will be true. So let's code it. First, we will set a global variables here, like the current index. We will set it to 0. This current index is what we use to track the current index we are in this our numbers array. Then we'll have a boolean is done. We'll first set it to false. This is done, we'll track whether we are done iterating over this array. So next we'll come to this next function. Then inside it is where we'll now add our logic. First we'll get the current element from the numbers array using the current index. Then after that, we increment the current index. Then next, we will now check if the current index is greater than or equals to the numbers array, and the current index, the current element is undefined. If this passes, then we set is done to true. Yeah. So by this if condition, we know that we have come to the end of the numbers array. So we set is done true. Now the value here becomes the current element, and done becomes the is done variable. So we are done with just a simple iterator. Now to test the iterator, we just first write a custom iterator, then call the iterator function like this. So this custom iterator holds this object that the iterator function returns. Then from there we'll first call the next function from the custom iterator variable. First we'll have to log it. We'll log the call. Then we'll say custom iterator dot next. So this here will give us value 1, done, false. Then we'll call the custom iterator again. Custom iterator dot next. This here will give us value 2, done, false. Then we'll call it the third time. Make the same call. Custom iterator dot next. Then the value becomes, this time around is 3. Then done, false. Then on the fourth call, custom iterator dot next. Then the value becomes undefined, and done is true. So now let's run it. So you see the first call, value 1 done false. Second call, value 2 done false. Yes, from the array. Then at the third call, value is 3 and done is false. Then at the fourth call, this checks out. And this current element here becomes undefined because the current index in this case will now be 4 or 4, 3, like it will be more than 2. So it becomes 3, 4, 5. So in this case, it references the array. There's nothing, there's no third index, fourth index, fifth index, and so on. So current element here becomes undefined. Now this if condition passes, current index is now greater than the element or equals to, because if it is 3, the element is 3, so greater than or equals to the number. So this one passes and current element is undefined. So here become, because undefined is a false value, so this logical not done against it will now make it true. So the if condition passes and is done, it becomes true. So that's why we have done here as true. So any more subsequent calls apart from these three, it will give us these answers. So we have created a custom iterator to see how the iterator works. So this is exactly what these are exactly what the for of receives when they call values that have the symbol dot in the iterator in them. This is what the iterator function does. On the basic level, this is what it does and returns the values to the for of. Then the for of now logs, now gives us the value of this value property in the object here. What it returns till when the done is false, it exits the iteration and gives back control to the main thread. Now, remember, we cannot iterate over an object. Let's see it. First, let's just create a constant log here so that we don't have to repeat the console.log each time. So this becomes constant here. So we cannot iterate over an object using the for of. For example, look at this object, user with properties name, Namde, with age 30, status married. Now let's log it. Let's log the user object here. So this cannot go because an object is not iterable. The user is not iterable. This is an object. But we can make this iterable since we have learned how the for of works and also how the iterator function works. We already know that the for of calls the iterator in the object that it is iterating over, then calls the next method and returns the value in the object property it returns. So, but an object doesn't have that symbol dot iterator. Let's confirm it here. It does not have it. We'll do something like this: symbol dot iterator. An object does not have it, like we already know. So you see it is undefined. So now we can make an object to be iterable. So what we have to do is to create a symbol dot iterator property on the object dot prototype. So in doing that, we will now assign an iterator function there. So with that, we can now be able to iterate over an object using the for of loop. So let's clear this. In order to do that, first we'll go up here, then write object.prototype. We are using the object.prototype because we want to make an object to be iterable. If this we want to make an array iterable, we have to use array here. So an object is an object. So we use this object here. So you see, provides functionality common to all JavaScript objects. So now we'll now add our symbol.iterator, symbol.iterator. So in doing this, we are now creating a property in the object class, which is symbol.iterator, and it should be a function because it's a function that will be called. So inside this function is now where we now write our iteration logic. Now, how do we want to do it? It depends on us. So what I want to log, if we want to run the for of in an object, so we want to log the values of the properties there. So I want, when we run this, it will first log the first string Namdi, then log 30, then log married. So let's do it here. First, we know this should return an object, as we did with the other custom iterator, and the object will have a property function, which is a function, and the property also, this property function will return an object with properties done and value. Let me put value first, then done last. So we'll still flesh this out. We'll come to that. Let's make this enter. Then let's start. First, we'll have to capture the current object being called. So first, to do that, it will be on this. The object being called here will be retrieved in the this keyword. So we have seen that. Now, how do we get the properties here? So first, we'll have to get the properties or the keys of this object. We'll have to get it. Now, to get it, we need to call object.keys on this variable. Object.keys, we'll call it on it. Then we'll assign it to a constant properties. So this properties variable will hold an array of the properties in this object: name, age, and status. Then likewise, we'll now set our global variables. First, the current index. Like we know, this is an array that will hold the current iteration in this properties array. Now, next is done. We'll set it to false. Is done. Will tell us when we are done iterating over the properties, and we'll have to return it in this done property. So first, let's assign it here. Done. Now, next, we'll now write our iteration logic inside this next function. Now, first, we'll get the current element. And how do we get the current element? We already know that this is an object. So we'll now have to access the object. Now, also, we'll get the key from this array, from this current index. Now we know that whatever we get from this properties array with this current index will either be this, or this: name, age, and status. So we know it is a string. So that being a string, we'll now use that string to access the value from this object, because we know that this object holds this. So we come inside here, then reference the key, the current key, then current index. That's it. So we have the element. So the current element can either be this string Namdi, 30, or married. Now we increment the index. Now next we add our condition. We now say if the current index is greater than the properties array, and we'll set is done to true. So when the current index is greater than the properties length, we'll set is done is true. So there's nothing much else to do. So set is done. And the next thing we have to do is we'll now set the current element to this value property.